The best of Money Matters. The Big Story.
Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Hongbin Jeong. It's not every day that you see a car swallowed up by the road in Singapore. But over the weekend, a stretch of road along Tanjong Katong Road South collapsed, opening up a water-filled sinkhole that caused a vehicle to plunge right in. Thankfully, the driver, a woman, was rescued in time by nearby workers and is now recovering. PUB says the sinkhole occurred next to an existing work site near the junction of Tanjong Katong Road South and Mountbatten Road at about 5 p.m. So what exactly causes something like that to happen? How stable are our roads near construction zones? And what safeguard are there in place to prevent something like this from happening again? Well, first, to explain is David Ng, who is the chairman of the Civil and Structural Engineering Technical Committee at the Institution of Engineers of Singapore. Hi, David. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, David, what exactly causes a sinkhole to form? Is it something that can occur even in a well-developed country like Singapore?
Well, for sinkhole, it happens all because of a void that actually developed underground. So the development of such void, when it becomes bigger and bigger and it grows near to the ground surface, and the ground surface or road surface, when it's not able to withstand the loading on it, that's where you see the cave-in and sinkhole happen. So how does this kind of void actually happen? It can be due to several reasons. For example, if you look at our neighboring countries, for example, Kuala Lumpur, they have their geological condition, which we call this limestone formation. They have quite a number of voids actually underground. So therefore, there's a possibility of soil wash into such void and then creating a void underground, and such void can develop into sinkhole. Well, whereas in our country, Singapore, we actually do not have such ground condition. Our ground is actually quite firm and competent, so we do not have a condition like what we have in other countries that has similar condition like limestone. So for our case, the formation of such void is mostly due to utility problem. For example, water pipe leak or burst that can wash away some of the soil underground, then you create a void after that. Or it's due to construction activities such as underground construction for deep excavation, construct basement, underground MRT stations, such as that, or doing tunneling work. So such underground activities may also possibly cause the ground and water lost into the excavation zone and therefore created a void outside the excavation. So such void will then slowly develop and grow over time. Sometimes it can be happening quite deep underground, so we do not feel it. But when this void are growing itself, and eventually when it comes to near to the surface, and it's just like initially if you are resting on a stack of A4 size paper, for example, you are able to sit firmly on it. But when the paper get less and less, if you have, let's say, extremely rare, only left one piece of paper on the top surface, right, you will be no longer able to withstand any load on it. So anything come on top of the paper will then cave in, will then cause a cave in into the sinkhole.
Well, some experts say that the Tanjong Katong Road sinkhole did not happen overnight. I mean, if this didn't happen overnight, then how long does it typically take for something like a sinkhole to develop?
Actually, there is no fixed time frame on how a sinkhole develops. But definitely, usually it does not happen overnight because, as I explained earlier, that it's usually started with a void. Right. It could be a smaller void at first, but it may propagate and develop into a bigger void. So it will take time for that to happen. And then sinkhole can also happen in various sizes. We do have some smaller sinkhole that happen, but those could be happening due to various reasons, such as what I mentioned earlier. So it depends on the size as well. So for a big size sinkhole, that what we see in the Tanjong Katong Road is you can see the size is actually quite big, where a car can actually fell into it. So for such size, for example, it will take some time for it to develop into it. But it also depends on different various factors as well. So for example, if it's due to if it's a water leak, so it depends on how much is the water leak. If the water leak, the pressure is very high, it keep washing away the soil material very fast rate, right? Very fast speed. Then the void can be created within a very short time. And then you can develop this sinkhole within a very short time. For example, a few days. But if a small leak, then the water is flowing slowly. It may take a few weeks or even longer. Still, such sinkhole can happen. So it depends on many factors too. So there's no fixed timeline for how a sinkhole can be formed.
Okay. Well, PUB has said that, 2 water mains were damaged. Could damaged water pipes have caused the collapse?
It is one of the contributing factor. The water pipe leakage and the water pipe burst could be one of the possible contributory factors, that it actually did wash away the soil underground and created a void, and subsequently the void developed into a bigger void and eventually near to the surface and sinkhole happened. So, but the question is that how this water pipe actually burst. So due to fact of construction activity nearby that caused the pipe to be suffer some settlement. So when the water pipe suffers some settlement at the joints area, it may not be able to take such stress, and then eventually it may give way and water may leak and eventually burst into higher pressure. So the formation of a sinkhole, it could be a contributing factor from the first. There are some ground movement caused by some construction activity nearby, as for example, the shaft excavation, right? And eventually such movement can induce some pipe movement and then there may be some water leak from the pipe. Then this water leak from the pipe may slowly erode away the soil around the water pipe. Then the water pipe may end up suspended in the air, right? Initially, the water pipe could be actually being supported by the soil beneath it. But now, because of the water that has leaked from the pipe and eroded the soil around it, and eventually the water pipe becomes suspended in the air, it may actually suffer more deflection, and then let's say if there's a joint there, the joint between the pipe may give way, and therefore it may lead to a larger water leak or water burst, and therefore wash away a lot of soil, and created that void as a result.
So is it safe to drive to that area now? And what about the surrounding infrastructure?
So at the moment where the sinkhole occur, that's where the greatest area of concern. Then from there, we normally have estimated influence zone around the area of where the sinkhole is. So that influence zone is generally estimated based on how deep the sinkhole. So typically, for example, the depth of the sinkhole is say 5 meter, 10 meter, then the influence zone could be estimated as 2 times the depth. For example, if your depth is 5 meter, then you say that 10 meter around the sinkhole, we will need to do more detailed investigation to find out whether there's any void or settlement that is underneath the surface of the road or surface of the ground. So this can be done by doing scanning, doing GPR scanning, or use some visual inspection to actually check whether there's any excessive settlement. So if that area of influence zone can be ascertained to be safe, I think the area outside the influence zone should be safe. And therefore, I think that's typically how we ascertain after an area incident that has occurred. Then we will actually assess the surrounding area within the influence zone first to ascertain that once that is secure, then actually the area around should be safe. If the area within the influence zone, there's a lot of concern as well, then we will enlarge this influence zone to further investigate even outside, even a larger influence zone. Then we can then able to ascertain that it is safe to allow public to access the area.
Okay. Well, then are there warning signs that the authorities can look out for to prevent something like this from happening again, or is it usually sudden?
Usually visible when we have before such serious sinkhole is happening, because we normally will see large settlement, unusual settlement of the surrounding ground where the sinkhole is forming. Because the sinkhole don't just, as I said, the sinkhole usually don't just form immediately. When it is formed, it will cause some surrounding ground to move towards the sinkhole as well. So as a result of that, we will have some telltale sign. For example, the road will have cracked. There will be some settlement sign on the road surface or even on the ground or the curb area. So usually we will be able to see it. And then, as we said, this is a sinkhole could be induced by water pipe burst, right, or due to the construction activity. So when we carry out the construction activity, for example, say the activities that we are doing and the observation that we see on site should be able to give some telltale sign. For example, there may be some soil and water loss into the excavation that they are doing. For example, the shaft, right? So there may be some soil and water loss into the excavation. So they know that, there must be this soil and water must come from somewhere. So there could be some possible void that's formed outside the excavation that we have to do a further detailed investigation to ascertain that whether this void that could be possibly formed due to the soil and water that's lost into the excavation is of any concern. Will it develop further? Do we need to fill it up? And so on. So that is the construction activity that during the construction activity, we are actually able to sense that is there anything wrong on the surrounding ground, right? Based on the construction activity that we are carrying out. Then on the other hand is the utility. For example, the water pipe. If the water pipe has a sign of leakage or it has burst, so it must have washed away a lot of soil material around it. So it will call for more detailed investigation to check whether there's any void that is in the vicinity of the water pipe burst. Then if there's any, we should quickly fill it up with grouting, with LSS, and we can actually certain that is safe. If the void is left there, we know that it will slowly propagate and eventually a sinkhole may happen. So this is some of the signs that we can actually see, and we can take action actually when we see such kind of telltale sign or activities or things that have happened at the site, and then from there we can prevent such incidents from happening.
Well, with more underground works happening across Singapore, David, should the public then be concerned about similar risks elsewhere? Could more sinkholes occur?
We are a very urbanized city, so actually we do have a lot of underground work that's ongoing. But I do not think that being a very urbanized city, then having more underground construction work leads to more sinkhole incidents such as this one. So this incident is actually very uncommon. Only see it, in fact, first time in such serious condition. So we do not really see in the past, although we have a lot of underground construction activities that we are already carrying out in the past, right? So, all right, we did do a lot of construction activity, especially underground construction, but we do have a lot of mitigation measures that we actually put in place. Because when we are carrying out underground construction work, which is a very specialized field of construction, we always have in mind that we need to actually minimize impact to the surrounding while we are doing the underground construction work, especially not to cause any excessive settlement in the surrounding that will damage the adjacent properties, or not to have any sinkhole incident underneath the road and so on. So our main objective is actually to come up with the necessary mitigation measures and control and monitoring during the construction, so that we can actually minimize such incidents from happening while we are doing the underground construction work. We are actually in Singapore. We are actually very advanced in terms of underground construction, and also we have a lot of guidelines and regulations that actually bring us to a very high standard of construction of underground works in Singapore. For example, at the design stage, we do have our design done very carefully by specialists, professional engineers, and then we also have the work checked by our accredited checker system, and eventually it will be approved by our building construction authority. So the standard of design is very high, and during the construction, we will have a lot of instrumentation being installed to actually monitor what has actually happened in the surrounding ground, so that we know exactly how the ground behaves during the construction work. So all this will be able to give us early warning sign if there's any unusual activity or ground movement that we should be of concern. Therefore, we can then take necessary action in time.
Thank you so much, David, for your time and your insights today.
No problem.
Thank you. We've been speaking with David Ng, who's the chairman of the Civil and Structural Engineering Technical Committee at the Institution of Engineers of Singapore, who helped us break down the likely causes behind the Tanjong Katong sinkhole and what this means for road safety and future construction safeguards. But beyond the immediate concerns about public safety and engineering, this weekend's sinkhole incident also raises more questions. Who's responsible when something like this occurs? And what are the civil legal ramifications arising from this incident? Well, joining us now to explain the legal side of the issue is Daniel Tay, who is the director at BR Law Corporation. Hi, Daniel. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
All right. So to start off, what are the most likely legal grounds for liability in this sinkhole incident?
Well, the law that comes to mind is the Workplace Safety and Health Act. So in the workplace, you have heard of WSH or WSH obligations. Well, this is the law behind it. Well, so what it does is that it places in one section an obligation on employers to protect not just employees, but the general public who might be affected by work that was going on at the sinkhole site. And then in another section, there's a separate obligation to make personnel at work potentially liable for willful or reckless acts. So it's kind of a scale where at the lowest, you could see fines of up to 75,000 for incidents with low culpability and harm. And on the other hand, with events with high culpability and harm, where the fines can go up to 500,000 for companies and 200,000 for individuals. With jail for individuals up to 2 years, or both fine and jail. I actually have contractor clients, they're doing very similar pipe installation works to what is going on at the Tanjong Katong workplace. And from the news from Marine Parade some time back, we also had another flooding incident at the exit from ECP to Marine Parade Road. That was just a few months ago. But in all these cases, we thankfully didn't have to read about the driver getting seriously hurt or mortally wounded, and hopefully we never will. But there was potential for serious harm, I think, to the driver in the Tanjong Katong sinkhole case when the car went in. So I guess we just have to wait and see what happens after investigations. I guess on one hand, you've got willful and reckless, and on the other hand, if it's negligence, it's not so bad because negligence, relatively speaking, the fine is up to 30,000 or jail of up to 2 years. So there is still jail time there.
But which entities could potentially be held responsible for the sinkhole and its consequences?
Well, at the most basic level, currently we have some of the authorities coming out on the news to talk about what's been happening. So what's going to happen is that the authorities would then carry out the investigations for the relevant construction firm which was involved in the incident. And then they would then consider from the investigations whether there were actions that were either negligent or willful or reckless. And there's been some speculation I see online about people asking about whether it's an act of God. Well, I don't know, but I guess we'll see from the investigations. And currently from what we see from today's papers about a case on ring. So if that has given way, then I suppose it might be more to do with something a bit more to do with human error, perhaps. I don't know. But we just have to wait and see as to what could happen. So depending on what happens later, at the most basic level, the individuals involved could include perhaps the operator of any equipment causing a collapse, work and safety supervisors, project managers, maybe even the project director of the company or the construction firm which caused the incident. On a higher level, maybe even management, if there wasn't any policy for training, risk assessments, or implementing safe work practices and ensuring compliance with safety plans.
So what types of damages can affected individuals claim, and how are these typically assessed here in Singapore?
Well, loss is typically assessed in monetary terms to put that person back in the position that they would have been but for the incident. So I guess what comes to mind in this case is the car value, for sure. I don't think she's going to get another car replacement to give to her despite the COE prices, but still, the car value, depending on what it's valued at by a loss adjuster a bit later, her medical fees, of course, and perhaps any loss of income during her medical leave period. Thankfully, in this case, we hear that she's not that seriously hurt. So in terms of future medical expenses, hopefully that's going to be a minimal.
Also, what is the legal process for those seeking compensation or redress in a situation like this?
Well, the person involved could first contact the relevant authority, including I would think the main purpose being to identify what's going to happen and also to see what is the relevant construction firm that was involved. And I suppose it goes on from there. And I would think that the driver in this case would also notify her insurance company who is taking care of her car issue. And from there on, given that there was a total collapse in this case of the sinkhole, insurance is likely to be involved. And so you might then get one insurer talking to another insurer, and if they can't settle it between themselves, then lawyers, of course, then have to get involved, and you might get a claim in court if it can't be resolved, and then that, of course, goes to be resolved as per any other civil claim.
Are there any legal obligations of authorities and contractors in preventing such infrastructure failures?
Well, I guess, it's quite amusing, Do we just stop, Do we just say that, we're not going to have this ever happen again? And, the online clips are quite amusing where some say, dig some more and see what happens. But the answer is no, So WSH, the legislation, it takes care of what happens from these such incidents. So we learn our lessons and we tighten our work and safety procedures so that it doesn't happen again. So WSH, it provides the stick to prosecute and acts as a deterrent. So I tell my clients and my students, and I also teach at BCA and SUSS, so I tell them, Singapore is the never-ending construction site, but in a good way, because we all benefit from progress and development. So it always goes on. We do our best, we strengthen our procedures, and we hope that this just never happens again. And hopefully with the procedures that we learn after things like Nickel Highway, or perhaps the Simei flyover incident, each and every time the procedures are strengthened. So we can then rest in the assurance from the authorities that this is being taken care of.
Some great insights from you there. Thank you so much, Daniel, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That was Daniel Tay, who's a director at BR Law Corporation, on the legal implications of the sinkhole incident at Tanjong Katong Road South. This has been The Big Story with me, Hongbin Jeong.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.